Hello, and welcome to New Beginnings Start Today, the podcast for people who want to grow deeper in their faith in the Lord. I'm your host, Dr. Douglas Keffer, a minister, clinical pastoral counselor here in Roanoke, Virginia, and I have a passion for helping people to live their faith. Today, we will talk about God's authority is absolute, and how you can trust what God says to be absolute because He is perfect. Let's get started. The issue of authority in our society today is looked at in so many different ways. We look at the many different kinds of authority and are not sure what it is to be able to trust those in who are supposed to be in authority. We're going to have to come back to the basic belief that God's authority must be followed if we are going to see a change in how our society is going to be more compassionate and then productive. King Solomon teaches us that God's authority is absolute when he writes, "There is no wisdom or understanding or counsel against the Lord." Proverbs 21, verse 30. This is a truth that is adamant and must be followed without question. I know as soon as I say that there are going to be many of you who will say, "Dr. Keffer, I just cannot believe that because there are so many factors that I have to take into consideration to know what to do in so many areas." This is where we get into trouble because of the effect of secular thinking that propagates that there are no absolutes. I have told people for many years this truth for me. If God says it, it is done for me. I believe that. And this truth has been a blessing to my life in countless situations. I believe King Solomon when he says that there is no wisdom or understanding or counsel against the Lord, because I believe unequivocally that God is sovereign. He is all-powerful and all-knowing. I have spent my lifetime being taught that God is to be believed and obeyed above all other authority. This is so difficult for people today because the concept of authority is being diminished. So few people trust those who are supposed to be in authority because it has just been so misused. Let's look at parental authority, for example. Parents are struggling with their ability to teach their children basic moral principles because they struggle themselves with their beliefs in what is right and what is wrong. This causes the children to not really believe what they are being taught because there is very little consistency in what they see their parents do. Those teachings are so many times contrary to what they are being taught by their parents. This lack of respecting the authority of parents undermines the very foundation of any society, as the home is the building block of any society. God's authority says, "And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." Ephesians, the 6th chapter and verse 4. When fathers live by that truth, then we see the effects of that godly authority being obeyed when Paul says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you, and you may live long on the earth." Ephesians 6, verses 1 through 3. These admonitions are absolutes. The family unit is so dysfunctional today, it is hardly recognizable. Too many husbands and wives are living so disassociated that the model that they are giving their children of that relationship is waning. This weakness causes children to not believe that they can feel safe because they do not know when the family is going to be torn apart by divorce or by catastrophic events that take place so readily. Children then start acting out, and things become very tense, and things go from bad to worse. I have seen this happen so many times over the years that I have lost count of the families who have been torn apart because of the lack of God's authority being followed. I'm thinking of a husband and wife that quit following God's rules in their lives and started fighting with each other. That led to them filing for divorce. Then I sat with the dad and his son, and with the dad wanting me to help him communicate with his son that things were going to be okay, that things were going to be all right. The problem was that the son continued to hear mom and dad fighting with each other over the terms of the divorce, and this 10-year-old boy lived in fear and insecurity. Parents are going to have to do a better job, a much better job, believing God's plan for the family and obeying His authority over the family. Let's look now at God's expectation for governmental authority. The Apostle Paul tells the Christians who were living in Rome, the hub of world authority, this truth: let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Romans 13 and verse 1. When he talks about every person being subject to the governing authorities, that all starts with the people who are in positions of authority. That means that the President of the United States down to the local elected officials are morally bound to be obedient in what the established laws require for there to be civil order in this country. That is just not the case, as we are seeing very little respect for the positions of authority. What has happened to our motto that is on our currency that says, "In God we trust"? That saying has no real meaning to the majority of people who are supposed to live by it, because there is such a lack of respect for authority in today's society. All one has to do is look at the news headlines on any given day, and one can find a report about corruption in the government, and sadly, a lot of that today is with those who are ruling at the top. There are very few people living in local communities across this country who really believe that the elected officials really have their best interest at heart. We then have to look at our moral responsibility as the people living in our society to be obedient to civil authority. The Apostle Paul goes on and teaches us, therefore, whoever resists the authorities resist what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. Romans 13:2. Paul all too well understood that there were consequences for not obeying civil authority, as he himself was thrown into prison for what he believed. That was not because he just went around causing people to be disobedient, but rather that he was a model citizen. I was taught this principle as a child. You may not agree with what the official is doing, but you have to respect the office that he or she holds because God put that position of authority in place for our good. I believe that principle more today at my age than when I was a child. We are taught that if we resist the authorities God has appointed, we resist God and we will incur judgment. This can be as simple as driving on a street, and the speed limit sign says speed limit 45. If we are driving down that street at 60 miles an hour, there is a good chance that a police officer is going to make us pull over and write us a ticket for reckless driving. We are going to incur judgment on several different levels. We are going to be summoned to court to have a judge tell us what our punishment is going to be. Then there is the infringement being placed on our driving record with the DMV. Then we have to deal with the fact that our car insurance premium is going to go up, and that is going to cost us more money for our insurance. This could all have been avoided if we simply would have been obeying the speed limit on that street. There are always consequences to the choices we make on a daily basis. God knew that it was going to be very difficult for people to truly learn to obey what he told us to do. That did not stop him from putting his expectations in place for us to do what he would tell us to do. He gave Moses the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai and expected his people to obey them. And if they did, they were going to live long, prosperous lives. We see how quickly they started to disobey him, and we see the consequences for that generation. They died in the wilderness and were not permitted to occupy the promised land. Now listen to what Peter told God's people about being obedient to God's law. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. 1 Peter 2, verses 13 and 14. We are to be obedient to those who are in positions of authority, for the Lord's sake, to every human institution. They are put in those positions to carry out God's judgment in 2 ways: to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. There are 2 pathways that one can follow with regards to being obedient or not. Listen to how King Solomon put it so clearly when he says, "But the path of the just is like the shining sun, that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble." Proverbs 4, verses 18 and 19. This truth tells us that if we believe that God's wisdom is absolute and we are obedient to that wisdom, we are going to see life in a very positive and productive way. Those who do not believe God's authority to be absolute find themselves living their lives in a way that when they are disobedient, they don't even know they are being disobedient because their hearts have become so hardened. My prayer for each of you is to have an ear to hear God's wisdom for your life, so you can live victoriously every day. This will allow you to be a witness to those around you that you truly believe God's will for your life, that it gives you the fulfillment that brings God honor and it brings him praise. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I want to invite you to contact me and share how you're finding God's authority to be absolute in your life. Here's the question. Please tell me how you allowed your belief that God's authority is absolute to make a difficult situation much easier to deal with. What was the outcome? If you are seeing this on YouTube, please click the subscribe button and the like button, and also click on the share button and share it with your friends. That would be so helpful to me. You can also find the podcast on Spotify. Tell me about other issues you would like me to address by leaving your comments, and you can email me at drdouglaskeffer@gmail.com. Until next time, God bless each of you.